I want to start by saying thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad you're here. It's nice to see familiar faces, but also some new names. Welcome. We've got lots of valuable information to get through in the next hour, and I'm going to record it, and I'm going to post the recording on YouTube, on the Talk About Talk YouTube page. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. All the podcast episodes and videos now are posted there, as well as my regular podcast feed. And I'm also going to post the video as a social media post on LinkedIn. So you can reference it later if you like, along with some key learnings. If you're here, I'm going to guess that you may fall into one or the other of a few different categories here. You may be in the middle of a full-time job search. You may be, going to a job interview when we're done here, or you have a job interview tomorrow or next week. You may be kicking off your formal job search, where you are thinking about what you want to do and setting up a plan, or you might be just considering a career transition. And that career transition, by the way, in all of these cases, could be internally. You could be looking for either a promotion or a lateral move into a different department. And I want to say that all of us should always be in that position, right? In that category of considering what's next. And when I coach folks on their personal brand and their professional identity, we talk about how your brand not only can evolve over time, but it should evolve over time. You don't want to stagnate, right? So here's the thing. Your communication skills, written, verbally, online, and in person, and in every way that you can imagine, right, are going to elevate or boost your success in terms of your communication, in terms of your career evolution, right? So I'm so glad you're here. My goal in the next hour is to take you through some material, like I said, that is going to boost or elevate your career trajectory, no matter what of the categories that I just shared you're in. We are going to be running through several topics here. You may have joined here based on the title, From Networking to Job Offer, Mastering Communication for Career Success. Specifically, we're going to cover three things in the next hour, okay? Those of you who know me know that I'm a little crazy about the power of three, but if you haven't heard me say this yet, here's the first tip I'm going to share with you. Whenever anyone asks you a question and you have to provide more than one answer, or if you're listing something, for any reason you're wondering how many, make three your default. There is tons of research in psychology and sociology and even across other disciplines that three is typically the right answer, the right number. Three is balanced. Three is substantive, right? Once you have three, you're starting a trend. Three is not overwhelming. So I can't tell you everything about mastering communication for career success, but I'm going to focus on the three things because I know you're going to be able to take something away from this. It's memorable and it's impactful. So what are the three things? I'm going to take you through, this is a 3x3, right? The three common mistakes of job seekers that I see all the time. And then we're going to get into some coaching in terms of three tips that I want to share with you for strategic networking, and three, I call them tips here for answering interview questions. They're really prompts or frameworks, okay? I don't share scripts. I don't encourage you to memorize a script, but if you have a framework in your mind, you could be asked any question, and when you default to that framework, you'll be communicating with confidence and credibility. All right, so before we get into those three things, for those of you who I haven't met, I just want to quickly introduce myself. I know some people in the audience I know very well, and some of you I've never met before. So just to get us all on the same page, I want to say it's lovely to meet you. My name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki. I know that's a mouthful. Please just call me Andrea. I'm an executive communication coach at Talk About Talk, where I coach ambitious executives, probably like you, on how to communicate with confidence. So we talk about communication skills, the typical communication skills you can imagine. There's confidence, there's listening, there's storytelling, there's formal presentation skills, how to deal with difficult people, negotiating and influencing, a whole gamut. One of the topics that gets a lot of traction in terms of my coaching and my workshops is personal branding. So helping people really identify their unique strengths so that they can talk about themselves with confidence and conviction. And like I said, establish a credibility. And of course, I do a lot of coaching for folks in terms of helping them prepare for interviews. So what to do before the interview, and then during the interview, how to be answering questions, what to be thinking about. So one of the things that I really focus on, no matter what the topic is what's your mindset? What are you thinking about? Especially if you get distracted and then you're like, oh, wait a second, what is the mindset that you want to ground yourself in? And then also frameworks and tactics that you can use, like really easy things that you can adopt as habits in different contexts, including job interviews, right? Things like body language and some of the things that we're going to be talking about here today. If you want to learn more about me, I hope you'll go to the talkabouttalk.com website, and there's all sorts of information there. I also wanted to mention that if you scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a ton of free resources. And I'm guessing based on the topic of today's free training, that some of those free resources in particular will be relevant to you. So a couple weeks ago, in coordination with Mr. Martin Buckland, we co-created a template that you can download that tells you exactly what you need to have in the top part. It's called above the fold, right? If you folded your resume in half, the top part of your resume, there's this applicant tracking system, the ATS or software that will boot you out if you don't conform to this, right? So give yourself a competitive advantage and don't get knocked out by the software. Make sure that when you're submitting a resume, this is not something that we're going to be talking about today, but there's a free resource there and lots of other resources on the website. In terms of my background, before I started coaching, which you can tell from my body language, I hope, and my tone, I absolutely love what I do. Before this, I worked in brand management, and then I went to Harvard Business School and I earned my doctorate of business in marketing at HBS. And my research focused on interpersonal communication and consumer psychology. So you can see there's sort of an evolution there, a common theme, right? When I graduated, I was working at the University of Toronto Rotman School of Management, teaching marketing in the MBA program there. And now I'm back there doing some executive education, and I also teach physicians at the Temerty Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto, along with all of my executive clients. And like I said, I'm really in my happy place now as an executive communication coach. So I do one-on-one private coaching, which I love, especially senior level coaches, anywhere from like 4 sessions to like a 6-month and beyond long-term coaching session. I do small group boot camps. I do corporate workshops, whether they're small groups, huge groups. They could be in person, they could be online. And then I also have a podcast with, I think we're at 180, if it's 179 or 180 as of this week episodes. And if you go into the archive, it's on YouTube, it's on Apple, it's on Spotify. You can search the terms for, is it you're on the job market, or you want to look at confidence, or how to introduce yourself. There's all sorts of topics there, and you can learn for free. And I don't hold back in those podcasts. Someone just the other day said, I love how you don't hold back, Andrea. You share everything you know. My goal is really to help you elevate your communication so that you can communicate with confidence, with credibility, and then you can make an impact. And whatever that impact is, I'm guessing based on the topic of today's live training, that impact for you right now has something to do with getting a new job. All right, so let's get into this. I'm going to share my screen. Fasten your seatbelts, because there's a lot going on here. If you have any questions, by the way, I should always mention this. I'm going to fire through the 3 topics that I just mentioned as quickly as I can, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions that you have. I'd love it if they were focused on career transition and job searching, but really anything that's related to communicating as an executive in business, I'm happy to answer. All right. 3 common mistakes of job seekers. Let me start here. I have this theory that understanding the do nots, understanding the mistakes that people make is more powerful than people realize. The first time this came to mind for me was when I was at Harvard Business School and I was trying to learn how to be a better teacher, right? How to be a better professor in front of the students. And so I was shadowing one of the top professors there, and I would go to her class and then we would debrief afterwards. And she said to me, Andrea, instead of asking people what to do in the classroom, ask them what not to do. Because the mistakes typically that people make in the context of teaching, but also in the context of job seeking and in the context of formal presentations, in the context of just about anything you can think of, the mistakes are usually common mistakes. When people tell you things that you should do, sometimes it's a style thing. And so I'm just giving you that as a sort of extra bonus here. That's why I'm starting with the mistakes. These are common mistakes. Don't start off making these mistakes. Number one, waiting until you need a job. I was talking to somebody on the weekend who may or may not be here. I think she is, who said, I think I really need to get out and start networking and talking to people about opportunities. And she's like, I mean, we all work really hard, right? I know we work really hard. And at the end of the day, I don't know, you want to go for a walk or you want to watch Netflix or hang out with your friends. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is to start thinking about expanding our network, updating our CV. When I interviewed Martin Buckland for the recent podcast episode on updating your resume and your LinkedIn, he said the biggest mistake that people make is not always having an updated CV. So I'm guessing that you probably guessed that this is one of the mistakes. If it is you, if you are one of those folks who waited, maybe there's some consolation in the fact that this is really, really common. And there are some things that you can start doing today that will help you. Okay. So don't lose hope. But if you find yourself kind of going through the motions, maybe think about updating your resume. Think about always working on developing your quality network, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But these are things that you should always be doing. Because you've probably heard this, your first day of your next job is also the first day of your next job search, right? We are constantly in career evolution. Our professional identity is changing. The company we're working for is changing. You got to think about positioning yourself optimally. Okay, you get it. The next common mistake is not being specific. So this one is something that is really, really hard because people feel like they're giving something up if they are more specific in terms of what they're looking for. So I'm coaching a gentleman right now who is super smart and extremely qualified in finance. And he's looking for a chief financial officer position or a VP finance position at a certain kind of company. But he's very apprehensive, right? About saying, this is the industry, this is the function, this is exactly what I want. But here's the thing. The more specific you are, the more likely you are to nail it more quickly. Why? Because people will remember it. Imagine you're on a networking call or you meet someone at a coffee shop and you're telling them that you're thinking about making a change and you're looking at this, and you're looking at this, and you're very vague about what you're looking for. What's the person going to remember? If anything, they're going to remember that you're looking for a job. But if you say, listen, I'm an HR executive and I currently work for this fast food company. I want a chief human resources officer position at a retailer in Canada. And all of a sudden, this person is going to be thinking in their head while they're talking to you and afterwards, right? Do I know anyone who works at that kind of company? So make it easy for people by being specific. And I'm guessing that your career evolution will be accelerated. So making it easier for people actually is the third point. I learned this one from Sharon, who I believe is in the audience here. She's an incredible executive recruiter, and she brought this up once when she and I were co-hosting a workshop with some executives. And she said, and she's also said this to me privately, right? So people, are networking when they're on the job search, and she and I both see this all the time. Don't always make it easy for you to help them. So who do you think you're going to help? If someone came to you, right, and said, I'm looking for a new job, can you help me out? And you had to like pry the information out of them, and then you had to go back to them and say, can you send me this information or that information? You want to make it really, really easy. That doesn't mean bombarding them with information. It does mean, first of all, doing some research on the people that you're interviewing, right? Or people that you're networking with, understanding them so you don't have to, spend so much time getting up to speed in terms of knowing each other. You could pre-issue a document. You could connect with them on LinkedIn in the moment so that they have you and they can refer you to other people, right? Whatever you can do to make it easy for others. This seems, as I'm saying it, it seems like motherhood, but you would be shocked at how many job seekers that I talk to who do not make it easy. So make it easy so that the person, minimize the number of clicks, right? Minimize the effort that other people have to take to help you. So those are the 3 common mistakes of job seeking. Don't wait until you need a job. Be as specific as you can, okay? And also that links to the third one. Make it as easy as possible for others to help you. I just love this Staples easy button. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here. This is the second of the 3 topics, right? 3 tips for strategic networking. So I've got a mindset that I want to encourage you to adopt. And then I've got a couple of more tactical hacks for you. The first one is this mindset. So I know from talking to lots of folks that the default mindset when people think about networking is, ew, I hate networking. It's yucky. I hate going into those, cocktail receptions or luncheons or whatever they are. I feel icky. And so here's the thing, and Sharon and I talk about this all the time. If you go into those events, or even when you write an email to someone when you're networking, if your mindset is of generosity, if your mindset is providing value to the people around you, how can that feel icky, right? So when you walk into this room of strangers, right, and the small talk's going on, instead of thinking, who am I going to talk to? Think, who can I help? It changes everything. It changes everything, right? Who can I help? And when you're listening, so then you open up a conversation with someone and you ask questions, right? Asking questions, get them talking so you can learn about them, and then be generous. How can you be generous? You can be generous by simply listening. You can be generous by making connections with other people, right? In the room, you could say, meet this person, meet this person. I know that you work in this industry, so do you. You two should know each other, right? Or you can do that on LinkedIn, or you can do it through email, but connecting people, sharing advice, sharing information. If there's an article, I do this all the time. I skim through HBR, I skim through Inc. magazine, I skim through Fast Company, I skim through all of these journals and magazines. When I find an article that I think is relevant for people, I send it to them, right? I'm trying to be generous. So if you can shift your mindset from that, well, I'm selling something, it's very uncomfortable, forget that. Remind yourself, and I do this too, when I'm invited to an event, I'm like, oh, the social awkwardness. No, Andrea, you're going in there to be generous. It's not even, by the way, about reciprocality. It's about you giving, right? And people will remember you. And this is also a great way to think about maintaining your strategic network, right? Think about reconnecting with people because you have something for them. It changes everything. I strongly encourage you to adopt this mindset starting right now in terms of developing your quality network. Be generous. Okay. The second thing, this is a game changer. Me, even in running my business, I find that this is a game changer. Always follow up. So this is about, first of all, adopting some habits. When you get invited to an online meeting or a meeting in person and you see who the attendees are, the first thing you should do is, well, one of the first things you should do is go into LinkedIn and connect with everyone there. You can look at their profiles and learn about them, right? If you don't have time before, the advantage there is you walk into the meeting and you say, hey, I know you're from Calgary. I'm from Calgary. Oh, that right. You accelerate the relationship trajectory when you know a little bit about people in advance. This is about being prepared and making it easy for people, by the way, right? If you don't have time before, do it after. So go into LinkedIn and connect with them and then follow up. I just wanted to say it was great to meet you, whether it's a networking event or an online meeting or an in-person meeting. It was great to meet you. And then you can reinforce something about yourself, right? Something about your message. Or you can add value. You can be generous. You can say, I'm going to follow up with an email and connect you with the person that I said I was going to connect you with, right? So you can use these together. You can be generous and follow up. So that's one thing. It's adopting a habit of connecting with people before and or after. You could connect with someone before the meeting, right? And say, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday night at the networking cocktail reception. And then after whatever the event is, right? And then afterwards, you DM them and you say, great to meet you on LinkedIn. Great to meet you. Like I said, I'll follow up by sending you a connection with the person that I mentioned to you. You see how easy that is? It's just, and we are all busy and we probably want to be generous, but we don't have the mental capacity to remember everyone. So imagine meeting someone at an event and then never hearing from them again, right? Versus imagine someone connecting with you before the event, saying they're looking forward to meeting you, then seeing them at the event, and then after the event, having them follow up with something that adds value for you, that's, something they're doing that's generous. There's a huge difference there. So that's the habit part. The other part of following up is not hesitating to reach out to people in your network that you haven't heard from for a while. Actually, just before I logged into this, I was on my phone and I got a message from a friend of mine from my undergrad who runs a business in Toronto. And he's like, hey, Andrea, blah, 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 3 things I want. And I was like, so I know from talking to my clients that a lot of people feel like it's weird to reach out to people when time's lapsed, especially if you really only know them in a professional context, not a personal context. I don't know anyone who says, it's really weird that that person reached out to me. It is not. So it's not awkward. In fact, 100% of the people that I ask this question to agree that when someone reaches out to them that they haven't heard from for a while, usually their first thought is, oh gosh, it's been a while. I should have reached out, right? So don't hesitate to follow up. And I have this image here of this calendar and this hourglass to remind me to mention to you that one thing that I've started doing and some of my clients have started doing that you might try is in your calendar reminding yourself to follow up with people. So if there's people that, maybe you are in career transition and you move from one company to another, and there's, 10 people at your old organization that you really want to keep in contact with, put an entry in your calendar, a reminder to say, follow up with these 10 people, boom. And then you could either meet them for lunch or send them an email or send them a message on LinkedIn, however that looks. But you can systematize following up and making sure that you are developing your network. And the idea here is that you are improving the quality of the relationship, right? That's really what a good network is. Not necessarily the biggest network. It's not counting followers and counting people that in your contacts. It's really about having strong relationships, quality relationships. And you can improve the quality of those relationships by following up on a regular basis. Maybe it's even every 6 months or once a year, but it's got to help. All right, so that's the second tip. The third tip is a pretty easy one, but it's leveraging LinkedIn. The DMs that you can send to people are great because it's like a way of diarizing or creating a diary, right, of your conversation over time. But even commenting on people's posts or sharing them with your thoughts, this is, I'm sure they would be very grateful if you did that. It used to be that a lot of successful folks only when we were talking about their network was their in-person network. And nowadays, your online network is, I was going to say, at least as important. It probably is, right? At least as important as your in-person network. So There are ways that you can improve your positioning on LinkedIn. You don't have to be posting there, 5 times a week like I do. You don't even need to post once a week, maybe a couple times a month. But the most important thing is that you need to make sure your LinkedIn profile is optimized. If nothing else, you've got to have a headshot. You've got to have a headshot that everybody can see. I was just looking at some people in my network who hide their headshot or other information about them. Here's the thing about LinkedIn. Your LinkedIn profile is free online real estate that you control. So everything on your profile, you put it in there, right? So put things in there that you're proud of, that you want the world to know, and then make it public. You want to have for sure your headshot. You want to have your banner image, something in there. It could be something very explicit, like the logo of your company, or it could be more implicit, an image that is somehow related to what you do for a living. And your headline, that's where you can use up to 220 characters to describe what you do. Your about section should be filled out, and you should have at least your job titles and your employers, the firms that you've worked at, if not also the descriptions of what you did and the impact that you made. So spend some time. By the way, LinkedIn makes it very easy for you to do this if you just follow their prompts. And yes, I do have a free tip sheet at the bottom of the talkabouttalk.com website that you can download that can help guide you through some of that. All right, we're on to the third of 3 things that I wanted to take you through. And this came pretty easy for me because I've been coaching a lot of folks lately on who are in career transition. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. I've got some frameworks and some prompts that are going to help you nail your interview. I am not a fan. I know I said this before, but I want to be really emphatic about this. I am not a fan at all of scripts. Why? A couple reasons. You sound rehearsed and you're not customizing your answer or whatever you're saying for the people and the context that you're in, right? So ideally, you don't want to sound rehearsed and you want to customize, say, a job interview answer, right? You don't, there are some questions that you're going to hear that you can probably anticipate. If you memorize the answer, it's going to sound memorized and you're not going to be customizing it for the person that you're talking to in the moment and in that context, okay? So instead, what I encourage my clients to do is to memorize, instead of a script, memorize a framework or a prompt. All right. The first one is the answer to this question, tell me about yourself. So when someone asks you this question, whether it's an executive recruiter, an HR person at an organization who's screening you before they, bring you into the finance department or the marketing department or whatever job you're going for, or whether it's the person in that department that could be your boss, sometimes they'll ask you this question just because they want to know what you think is important about yourself that they should know, right? Sometimes they're also testing you. They're testing you to know, are you a good communicator? And what about you? Do you know what it is that you're looking for and what your strengths are? So I have a framework to help you with this. This is daunting. Tell me about yourself. Like, how long do I talk? What do I say? Where do I begin? How do you frame it? I have a framework for you. A couple of years ago, I was published in Harvard Business Review with an article called A Simple Way to Introduce Yourself. And it's 3 steps: present, future. Too many of us, when we are asked to introduce ourselves or tell me about yourself, this brutal question, right? We start in the past. Well, I grew up in Calgary and then I did my blah, 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 and then I moved here. No. Start with the present. You want to anchor your self-introduction, and in this case, the tell me about yourself, with who you are and what you do. So you could say, the way I did at the beginning, right? My name is, I am a job title at firm. Or you could say, my name is, I am a finance executive and I'm looking for whatever. So it's present tense. If you've done the work on developing your personal brand, this is where you can also share some of your unique strengths. But at least you want to share your industry and your function and what you do now, okay? What you're good at. That's the foundation. That has to be step 1. Step 2 is where you go back and talk about the past. And You don't want to share a chronology. The mistake people make here is they share, um, I was born here and then I lived here and then I graduated here and then I did this. It's like, no, 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 no. Probably the person has read your resume and they see the chronology. Instead, say three things. Say, there's so many things I can share about you. Let me share with you three things, though. That remember, I said the power of three? Three things that I think are relevant for this job. Number one, I had experience in my previous employer doing whatever, whatever, whatever. Number two, I have this academic credential or this degree or this course that I took on whatever, and it really fired me up. And this is what I really want to focus on now, right? So you could talk about your credentials. You could talk about a specific experience that you had, maybe leading a team or participating on a team in launching a new product, and maybe if that's relevant, right? So you choose three things that are going to help you establish credibility. And I was talking about this recently with one of the executives that I'm coaching. He said, just three things? Like when they said, tell me about yourself, I think they want more. And I said, so they also don't want you to ramble on. So when you say, I'm going to share three things, there are many other things you could say to them, I'm happy to elaborate on any of these three things if you want. And there's all sorts of other things I can tell you about. But there are three things that I want to share. What you're really doing them a favor, because you're saying, I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to say the second thing. And then by the time you say, and now I'm on the third thing, they know you're done, with your list. And they're not thinking, imagine if you didn't tell them you were going to share three things. They're probably thinking, when the heck is he going to stop talking? Right? I did this and I did this and I won this award and I have this degree and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my goodness. And they start tuning out. If you have three things, they're going to be like, okay, what's the first thing? Okay, we're done one of three, two of three. There's just one more, three of three, right? So leverage the power of three within that part. The third point in this self-introduction framework is future tense. So here's where you tell them what you want, what you're looking for. If you're talking to somebody in your network about your job search, here's where you say, I'm really in my job search, I'm looking for this position and I'm thinking about this industry and this function. And then you bring it back to them, right? I'm really hoping that we can, I'm hoping that we can talk about and share our connections and whatever, right? So you talk about the future. So that's the first thing. There is a framework to help you answer this very vague, broad question. It's the same way we introduce ourselves: present, past, future, and it helps a lot. You will sound much more eloquent. All right. The second question that you're going to get is, why this job, or why are you the right person for this job, right? And it's like, oh, and then you have to kind of think about some strength of yours and link it to what they are looking for. Here's where, again, I would say leverage the power of three. So you could say, there's so many things about this organization that really resonate with me and my career goals and my strengths. So make sure you're not just talking about yourself and how it's helping you, but also how you can add value to them, right? So you could say, I have this industry. The first thing is my industry background, whatever. The second thing is I have connections, blah, blah, blah. And the third thing is I have this experience, whatever the three things. So I get this question sometimes from my clients. They're like, what if I can't think of three things in the moment? I said, that's never happened. It's never happened. You are smart enough in the moment to come up with three things. The why this job question, most people probably answer it in terms of one thing. You can add a lot of credibility to your answer and make it sound even more thought out and be more influential if you share with them three things. Okay, so again, leverage the power of three. I know I sound like a broken record. I have 3 points here, each with 3 subpoints. There's a reason for that. There's all sorts of research that shows that this will help you. All right, and the third question that you're going to get. And I remember when I was doing my undergrad, I actually took an HR class on behavior description interviewing. Actually, it was about whatever, job progression and job transition. And the professor had written a book about behavior description interviewing, which is basically the interview. It's common, right? Where they'll say, Tell me about a time, Andrea, when you had to overcome a significant challenge in the workplace, specifically in terms of interpersonal conflict. And you're like, and though, many of us have done the work to brainstorm what those questions are or what those situations are before we go in. I have a framework to help you answer those. If you haven't heard it, this is gold. It's called the STAR framework. And I want to tell you a story. She's not here. She's a superstar, but I met this woman who's a firefighter, a senior firefighter. She was what do you call it? A lieutenant or she was a captain in her fire hall, and she was going for a big promotion. No woman had ever had this position before, where she's not like the fire chief of Toronto, but she's the next to that. And I was helping her prepare for interviews, and we used the STAR framework, and she nailed it, and she got the job. And she attributes, I mean, she works her butt off, and she's got the stories, and she's got the background, and she's got the credentials. She absolutely deserved the job. But she said, thinking about these frameworks really helped her feel more confident. And instead of, sounding scripted, she could go through the framework. And by the way, this framework is very well known by recruiters and by people that are interviewing you. And what I've heard from the insiders is that they don't mind. So I wouldn't say I'm going to use the STAR framework, but you could say, well, let me tell you about the situation. So imagine this firefighter was asked, tell us about maybe some interpersonal conflict that happened in your fire hall, and what did you do about it and what was the outcome, right? She could say, okay, so here's the situation. And then you provide the context. That's step one. And then step two is the task. So what was the interviewee's answer, right? So you'd say, so my challenge here was, or you could even say my task, right? Nobody's going to mind if they think to themselves, she's using the STAR framework. They'll probably actually be impressed that you've done the work to understand this, right? So you share the context, the situation, you tell them the task, what was your challenge? Then A is action. So let me tell you what I did. I did this. Be as succinct as you can. Tell them what you did. And then, of course, you share the results, and you make the results as quantifiable as possible. You talk about what the impact was that you made, right? And it's very succinct. Instead of, tell me about a time, and then the person goes, so, 10 years ago, I was working at blah, blah, blah. No. Situation, ask, action, result, STAR framework. Okay? So I hope that these 3 frameworks or prompts will help you feel more confident. What I would do is I would write them down. If you're doing an online interview, you could even write past, present, future. You could write power of 3, or just maybe the number 3 and STAR, right? Like I have here in the STAR: situation, task, action, result. And then maybe on another piece of paper, you have a couple of stories that you can weave into these answers. Here's the thing. We all feel this adrenaline when we're in an interview context, right? Instead of focusing on your anxiety and what should I say? And oh no, I'm sweating and I sound like a stumbling idiot, right? Instead of going there, shift your mind to these frameworks that you've learned. It's like they're distracting you from your nervousness. Okay, so I'm going to summarize here the 3 common mistakes that you want to avoid. Waiting to work on preparing yourself for career transition, not being specific and not making it easy. Even if you haven't done anything to help you in your career transition for years, there's no better time than today. By the way, you're doing that right now. Congratulations. Be as specific as you can, especially when you're asking for help and telling people what your next goal is, and make it as easy as possible for people to help you. Then when you're networking, please adopt a mindset of being generous. It changes everything. Follow up. Don't think that it's weird to follow up. It's not weird to follow up. We're all busy and people will appreciate it. And make sure you're leveraging LinkedIn. Should be a no-brainer. And then in terms of your answering your interviews, the 3 prompts or frameworks, use present, past, future when they say, tell me about yourself, or if they might say, introduce yourself or tell me about yourself. That's your cue. Present, past, future. Use the power of 3. And if you're afraid they think that you're not answering the question completely, you could say something like, here's 3, there are many more, and I'm happy to share more with you, right? So make it clear that you're happy to elaborate, but don't babble. And then for behavior description questions, use the STAR method. And you can even use the words, the situation, the task, the actions you took, and the results. All right. So this is a lot, but let me tell you something. This is actually just the tip of the iceberg. You know, I've coached one-on-one and done some workshops and boot camps with people on optimizing their presence in terms of their career transition. There is a lot to get through, and it might seem overwhelming. So I wanted to share with you before I open it up for questions. I have a boot camp coming up in, I think it's 13 days from now. It's basically 2 weeks from now, starting on February 12th. It is a 1 month, so it's just 4 weeks. You're going to get through all of these skills that we've talked about here and more. So if you have your phone, you can use this QR code to find more information. But I just wanted to quickly run through this. You get 4 small group coaching sessions with the other boot camps. So when I first launched these boot camps, I thought, these are kind of, second tier compared to private coaching. Here's the reality. The reality is the other folks in the boot camp are going to be asking questions that you maybe hadn't thought of, and you're going to be learning a lot more. So these, I would call them semi-private small group coaching sessions, are incredible. And if you can't make one of them, you get 4 in the boot camp. If you can't make one of them, I always record them and you can reference them. And some people even who attend them also watch the recording later. You also get access to a private virtual group. So it's just for the boot campers. And for the month, we will be challenging each other. We'll be asking questions of each other. We'll be supporting each other. And yes, I'm in that private virtual group. So you have direct access to me, and I'm happy to help you in any way that you can. You also get lots of worksheets and resources, references to some things that I have available on my podcast, but a lot more, right? I'm going to be sharing frameworks with you and worksheets that are just specific to the bootcamp. I'm going to be running you through as a group some very specific things that you should and should not be doing on your LinkedIn, and then also individual evaluations of your LinkedIn profile. And we're also going to talk about, of course, your resume or your CV. And then you also get full access to my online course. I have an online course on personal branding. It's really my masterclass. Everything that I teach my clients on personal branding is in that class, and you're going to get that for free as part of this boot camp. So, and the magic in terms of your personal brand is when you are clear, right, about your strengths and your expertise, you've developed your professional identity, then all of this career transition stuff becomes a lot easier. You have focus, you have direction, and you have confidence. You're probably wondering how much. I know you're all thinking, how much? So full access to everything that I listed there is $950, providing you with this promo code to save $100. So the net price for you is $850. That includes tax, by the way. And if you want to learn more, I made this URL, this website a web page that you can access easily. It's talkabouttalk.com/FEB25, February 2025. It's not that we start on the 1st, we start actually on the 12th, which is a Wednesday. So I would love to see many of you there at that career transition and job seekers bootcamp. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now about the bootcamp, about how to answer interview questions, about strategic networking, about how to leverage LinkedIn, about all of these skills that are focused on our communication when we're in career transition. All right. Now I would love to answer your questions. Before I go into the chat, does anyone want to ask me a question here? I see lots of people on mute. Brad? No? Crystal? Hi.
Hello. Thank you, Andrea, for the session. I loved it. It's concise and your solutions are very pragmatic. And I also want to, take this opportunity to thank Sharon, because I learned this this session through Sharon's network.
Sharon's one of my besties. I love Sharon.
Yeah, I connected with Sharon, I think 10 or 15 years ago. So I think it's the time to reconnect.
Yeah, follow up, Crystal. You need to follow up.
Rule of power 3.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, or maybe, for this LinkedIn community. I don't know if how you guys feel that when you see all this, overwhelming numbers of, how many applications submitted once there is a job, posted. These days, I don't know, sometimes when I see that within an hour, 50, 60, even the hundreds, applications submitted. I don't know how you interpret this, or any of your views if you'd like to share.
So I have two answers for you with regards to that, Crystal. Okay. The first thing I want to say is, yeah, because of our technology that we have, the number of people that are applying for jobs. I remember, so my first job, let me back up. I'm going to talk about me for a second. My first job out of university was as a Toys R Us store manager, but I desperately wanted to get into brand management, right? So I applied for a job at Kraft Foods, and I ended up going through this. I applied formally, and I had to go through this big interview process, and then I did get the job. And they told me after that there were like 400 applications, and I was like, what? And he said that you can't see my hands, but the pile of resumes was huge, right? So, I mean, 400 is a lot, but nowadays you add zeros to that because people just go submit, submit, submit. So my first answer to your question, Crystal, is make sure you make it through the first round. How do you do that? I was coaching my son recently on his resume, and I this was a couple of years ago actually, and I failed to share with him the ATS, the applicant tracking software that will boot you out. Because I was like, well, maybe you could do this and you could do this. He's like, Mom, it's a software, right? It's not a human. So make sure, this is my first piece of advice. You really need to make sure that your resume is going to make it through. So things like your credentials should not be on the same line as your name. If your credentials, like CA, chartered accountant, right, are on the same line as your name, the software will read that as part of your name. They need to go on a second line. Who knew? Who knew? If you go to the bottom of the talkabouttalk.com website, there's a thing you can click on for free, and it is very specific about exactly what the ATS is looking for. If you violate the ATS, it will boot you out. If you use shading or dark colors, or if you put in certain kinds of emojis or images, the ATS will think that that is an entire page. It's crazy. You will have, the other way to thinking about this is you will have a competitive advantage if you conform to the ATS, because most people don't. Statistics show that about 70% of resumes are booted out, or the people are disqualified for that. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I want to say is, Crystal, chances are you're going to get your next job, or whoever is going to find their next job based on their network. And, I remember when I was a doctoral student, there's this famous paper by Mark Granovetter, The Strength of Weak Ties. We've all heard that term, right? The Strength of Weak Ties. And he talked about it then. A couple years ago, another academic validated that even today, it is typically a friend of a friend who either hires you or connects you with someone that hires you. So this is why strategic networking is so important. And then remember, you want to make it easy and be very specific about what you're looking for, so that when, I talk to someone and I just met with someone who wants to get into pharmaceutical, blah, blah, blah. And then I meet someone and I'm like, ding, as opposed to so-and-so's looking for a job. So I hope that helps, Crystal.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think definitely this reconfirms with your networking strategy. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? I always prefer to answer questions directly of the people that are here. Anyone?
Hi, it's Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot and just refreshes a lot. And yes, I go back to my issue with networking is ick, right? So I know I have to overcome that. And I guess my thoughts and my questions are related to on the resume. I know ageism is a factor, and when you go back to listing your work experience, how do we manage that?
That is a great question, Susan. I actually hadn't thought about that when I was preparing this, but it is really, really common. I have some resources that I will, when I post this on LinkedIn and also when I post it on YouTube, I'll put links in to ageism. There's a couple of ways of thinking about this. And by the way, this is also very common, right? I've talked to people even in like 40-year-olds who are saying that they're experiencing ageism. I'm like, oh boy. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I was told, oh wow, if you're over 35,
Okay, 35
already a
and
problem.
down. That's yeah, okay. All right. So there are a couple of strategies here. So first of all, when you have on your LinkedIn profile or your CV that you graduated in 1977 with your PhD or your whatever degree, you are priming them to do the math, right? When you talk about years, you prime people to do the math. So if you think you are past whatever that threshold is it varies by industry, by the way. I know that for coaches, like the older you are, the better, because then the more knowledge you have. I'm 54, by the way. So it's not a bad thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of here. But maybe in advertising or some other industry where youth is really valued, you don't want to prompt them. And by the way, it's not even just in your resume and your CV. It's even how you answer the question. This gentleman that I was coaching in the CFO and vice president of finance that I've been coaching, he would say things like, well, a couple decades ago, I was like, hold on, how about a while ago? Like, you don't need to prompt them to be thinking about how old you are. So that's one thing, right? Also, they know, right? Like they know, especially if you're in the room, they know. So think about some phrases. It's not a script, right? But think about some phrases that you can use that will really help you. You can say, I have experience at 3 different companies actually in this industry. So if you think about it, it's like I have a catalog of case studies in my brain about how to handle these situations, right? So you can turn it into a positive. I call it creating a narrative. You can create a narrative around the value of your experience, right? And you could say, you could even say, and I did some writing about this, you could even say, I'm going to call out the elephant in the room. I'm the oldest job candidate here. Let me tell you what that gives me. And so just you could say it directly. It's really about controlling the narrative. Yeah. And the other thing that I've heard, and this is a bit of an aside, it's kind of just general, is there are old 50-year-olds and there are young 50-year-olds. So talk about your energy, right? Have a big smile on your face. Talk about the fact that you just went for a run. Talk about your energy and your vitality as opposed to, your grandkids.
Okay.
I have no idea if you have grandkids, Susan.
I
All
do.
right. Okay. I'm looking at um the questions here. Ageism.
What to say about present if unemployed for the last few years? How do you
Okay.
yourself in the present if you're not currently working?
This is really, really important. And who asked the question, Priscilla? Was that
That's
you?
from many.
Oh, okay. So I have been thinking a lot about career transition. And earlier this week, I wrote a LinkedIn article about how to narrate your career transition. That's actually what the title is, Narrating Your Career Transition. And there's 2 things I want to share with you. So one is there is a laundry list, a long laundry list of labels that you can put on your career transition, right? It could be I got fired. It could be I got packaged out. It could be I decided to take time for a reset. It could be I am upskilling, right? It could be I'm taking a personal leave. I could go on and on and on. So I think again, I'm not a fan of scripts, but if words and phrases that really resonate, so something that's true that also serves your purpose. So here's the thing. There are a million ways of telling the same story, including the story of your career transition. So tell it purposefully in a way that serves you. The first thing you want to do is identify the word or the phrase that you can that is authentic, that is positive, and that you can elaborate on in an honest way. If you go into LinkedIn and check out my LinkedIn newsletter from this week, you'll see the list there. The other thing that's in that article is a framework that I developed for answering a question about your career transition. And guess what? It's 3 steps. They all start with T, so it's easy to remember. It's talent, and then timeline, and then, oh my goodness, I'm having a brain cramp. I'll think of it. But you start with your talent, right? So instead of saying, well, this is what happened, you start by saying, I am a blah, 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 who's good at this, and I'm focused on this, right? So you anchor your answer in your talent. Then you can share relevant details of your timeline. You could say, I worked at XYZ company for 10 years and I got promoted really quickly, but I decided that it was time for me to explore new things. And I'm really interested in this other industry, whatever. So you share the timeline. And then the last T is tomorrow. So what I'm looking for is, and you talk about the future. So it's talent, timeline, tomorrow. And in the timeline part is probably where you're going to be labeling your transition. Like whether you say, listen, I got canned and it's not pleasant, but here I am. Or whether you say, I decided I need a reset. I'm upskilling. I'm talking to people. I'm thinking about making it bold, big moves this year, right? So however you narrate that, however you label it, that goes in the timeline part. And then the tomorrow part is where you enthusiastically talk about what's coming next.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to help. I respect your time, and I know that we've been an hour here, and I took you through a lot. I want to emphasize that the full video from today, from this session, is going to be available on the YouTube channel and also on LinkedIn. If you go to my profile, you can find it there. I want to say thank you for your awesome questions. I wish I'd gotten to more of them. I'm going to look through the chat, by the way, and if there's any questions that I haven't answered, I will put them in both the LinkedIn and on YouTube. Okay. And if you're interested in learning more about the Career Transition and Job Seekers Bootcamp, I would love to see you in that bootcamp. You can learn more information at talkabouttalk.com/FEB February 25, FEB 25. You can see a list of everything that we cover, what you get. And don't forget, there's a coupon code for $100 off. It's LinkedIn 100. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you on LinkedIn.